We have a little maintenance project on the John Deere today. This is the K66 rear end from Tough Torque, and what we're going to do is change the fluid in it. It's not that complicated of a process. In my case, I have to remove my rear weight bracket, which I have my bumper and my hitch bolted to. It's just a simple bolt-on. The only thing I added was a piece of angle iron at the back that bolts through the frame of the tractor just to add some rigidity. And if you have something like this, you'll notice that it bolts at the top, which is the factory style, and it's actually got these little fingers underneath that kind of just latch into the body. Those I found were the weak point for me, because that actually pulled the hitch right off of this thing one day. So the quick fix for me was to just add a piece of angle and some bolts through so it can still be taken off. Behind this hitch, I have my clearance holes drilled so I can gain access to the reservoir to fill this thing. And I've got it up on the ramp, so it should be easy enough to work on. We'll be able to open up both drain screws, drain the fluid, and then refill it accordingly. So let's get into it. So after a little more fighting than I'd be happy to admit, I have one stuck bolt, but I was able to still get the bracket off. I'll address that once I go to reinstall. It's not really a problem that I'm going to address in this video now. But the access holes are what give you access to that drive in order to fill it and check the fluid level. So drilling those holes in the back of the machine when you install the K66 is certainly a wise idea. Doesn't really hurt the structure of the machine. There's still a lot of material there, but you know, for the maintenance purpose, it certainly outweighs having to take this axle off in order to service anything. Next step in this process is going to be to drain the fluid in it and get ready to install our fresh fluid. Now, in order to make sure that I follow the recommendations from the manufacturer, I still have my manual, and it outlines this exact process in it. I'm not going to review that in this video, but I'll just show you the steps in the process here. All right, so now crawling underneath the machine, I've got it up on my ramps, and I've also got the front end lifted, so I have enough clearance to actually lay under here. It makes it a little bit more comfortable for me. I've got two drain bolts, I'm sorry. One appears to be for the gearbox, one is for the hydraulic pump area, and we're going to drain both of those. So I've got my wrench here, and I'm going to crack those loose. Okay, cool. And of course it's a windy day, because anytime you work with oil and stuff, you have to make sure it's windy. All right, you can see the little seal on there. There we go. Fluid's still got some nice color to it. It's clean. That's the intention. So now I'm going to totally remove the breather cap and the fill tube, the fill hole on the back there, the caps, and that should help our flow here a little faster. So now this cap on the right hand side on top of the plastic reservoir is just a plastic cap that snaps on. So a little bit of wiggling can help pop this out. Now this guy here is actually threaded with an O-ring. So you're going to want to turn that right out, and you can remove it for the sense of the draining. And we've certainly sped up the draining process now. We can see we've got a little bit of coloration there, but not anything too drastic, so I think we're doing okay. It doesn't look like any metallic colors in there, so far so good. We're going to let this drain, and then we'll put our drain plugs back in and get to refilling this. As I'm still waiting for this to finish draining completely, I'll share a little tip I like. This is something I like to do personally, and it's by no means required. Anytime I take out a drain plug from something, I like to just give it a little bit of a coat of paint. I prefer that it stands out. So when you look back under that machine, that drain plug is identified in a manner that's different than everything else. It also kind of shows that you're doing a bit of maintenance to this. So if ever you were to, say, sell your car and you go, oh yeah, you know, regular oil changes, and that person happens to crawl underneath there and look, I mean, a painted drain plug doesn't say that you changed the oil, but it looks like you cared. For me, it's a visual thing. I like to see it and go, oh yeah, those are my drain plugs. I don't have to question what's what, and quick reference kind of thing. But yeah, dress it up a little bit. I mean, in my eyes, it's not a problem. All right, so this has been draining for a little while now. I actually went in to have lunch in the meantime. So I think we're good to put the drain plugs back in now that they've been cleaned and hit with a little bit of a fresh coat of paint to kind of help them stand out a bit. So I'm going to get these in, snug them up, and the next step for us here is going to be working on refilling this transaxle and making sure we've got the correct amount of fluid in it so it can function properly. So in order to refill this transaxle, it's very tricky to get in there with a traditional funnel. Your best bet is probably some kind of container with a long hose on it that would be flexible enough to let you get the hose inside of those fill areas. In my case, I have a funnel that has a shutoff and a flexible hose. So this tool is going to be perfect for the job at hand. It's going to allow me to snake up inside of the fill area where I need to be, and then let gravity feed the fluid inside. Once I believe that I'm getting close to the level, I can actually shut the flow off, check my level, and continue. This even has a great lid on it to keep your fluids, let's say, clean and inside of this container. So I believe I got this from Canadian Tire, but there's your information of the label. And so far I haven't actually used it. This is going to be the first run, but I have a pretty good idea that it's going to work well for this task specifically. So this is actually the recommended oil that's used in this transaxle. Based on this current date, this may change, but they're recommending a high quality brand with a 5W50 full synthetic type motor oil based product. So that's what we're going to use. I actually don't have enough quantity of this, but I have a alternate product, the same viscosity, the same 550, the same full synthetic, and a high quality product. So between this bottle, which I've had extra of sitting around for a while, and the other two new bottles, I will have more than enough oil to get this job done. All right, so both reservoirs got full. Now I can see this clear plastic reservoir is still bubbling. So I need to burp the air from the system. There is a procedure in the manual that outlines how to do that. Essentially, you engage the freewheeling valve, which now disconnects the drive, but allows the internal pump to turn when the engine's running and you engage the throttle. And what they're asking you to do is basically hit the go button forward and backwards a couple of times and try to get that air burped out. Upon doing that, you'll have to let the oil level settle and then check your fluids. So I know that the rear diff level, I am pretty close to where I need to be, but it will change as we go on here. Same with this clear reservoir. It is still bubbling, so I know that there's air inside that system. Having drained all the fluid out, it drained for about 30 minutes, so it certainly took some time. Now they do caution in the manual that the only risk with overfilling the system is it just causing a mess. When it heats up, it needs, this tank is actually kind of acting like an expansion tank. That oil needs somewhere to go, and if it's full, it just oozes out. So really, I guess the risk is you make a mess. Running it low on oil, however, could be a completely different story and certainly more tragic. So I'd rather have a little much out here than not enough. But anyway, I'm going to start the machine up, and I'm going to cycle it through the forward and drive sequence a few times to try to burp some air out, and then we'll see where we're at. So we now have the mower safely back on the ground. I've got the freewheeling switch engaged. That's by pulling the lever out, or the towing valve, or whatever you guys want to call it. We're now going to start the machine. We're going to operate the throttle, and then I'm going to engage the valve, and we're going to see those wheels turn, hopefully. So this next part will be noisy on account of the engine sound, but bear with me and we'll get through it. All right, so trying to activate the throttle. We had no throttle response back here, which essentially means that we've still got air in this system that hasn't come out. We kind of figured that's what was going to happen. So now I can leave the tractor on the ground because I'm pretty well done crawling underneath to drain the fluids, and we can open our tanks and reservoirs and see where we're at with this situation. I'm suspecting we've just got an airlock happening, and we've got to let that system breathe, get those bubbles out in order to give us an opportunity to even get this thing rolling again. So I'm going to open this cap, and we're also going to pull off the breather cap and see what we find. So we now have the differential side filled. I'm just working on filling up that clear reservoir and trying to get the bubbles out of it. With regard to the differential, I actually had a bit of luck rolling the machine forward and backward to kind of work some of the bubbles out of that cavity. The turning gear inside from the differential area kind of helps work some of that air out, so that's something to consider. I'm going to probably use the jack and lift the back end up to allow the air to come back toward this tank, and hopefully give me a bit of a better shot here to get some air out of this system and get it filled appropriately, because I still have, you know, about that much fluid to set in there, and that's going to equate to then about the 2 quarts that it requires. So that's just a little bit less than 2 liters, but we should see some results here shortly. So off camera, I just ran it for the second time and tried to engage the drive. I still don't have any hydraulic drive. However, this time the fluid level dropped significantly in that reservoir, so that means I must have worked out some of the bubbles. What I've noticed as well, the lawnmower's lifted up. I've got the toe pin engaged, so that means it's ready to actually drive. I'm gonna try to place you guys where you can see. So the freewheeling valve is now engaged, which means the lawnmower's ready to drive. The parking brake is off, and I do have resistance trying to rotate, where normally this can't be done. But I'm able to hear the air bubbles inside popping and hissing. So I'm going to top up that reservoir some more and try this method a little bit and see if that helps me get the air out of this system and gets it rolling again. There we go. So it takes a while, but I eventually got some motion out of the rear end. Now I've worked some more out of the system, so I'm going to continue the same process. Add a little bit of fluid, try to work those bubbles out, and continue on the same task. So I'll keep you updated with the number of times I do this process, but so far it seems to be working for me. So I ran it one more time off camera, and this time the drive seemed to engage rather quickly. I had full operation of forward and reverse, so I think we've got those bubbles worked out. I did see the level drop in the tank, so I'm actually going to top it up a little bit, and I'm thinking maybe the next best thing for this is a bit of a test drive, just to kind of get the vibrations from moving it along, trying to shake everything loose. And I'll do that before I reinstall my rear mount bracket, just out of convenience. I don't want to have to take it off just to add some more fluid to this or to check the levels. So it'll be very important that I check the levels before I do any real work with this machine. I think just putzing around shouldn't be an issue, but once it gets into anything towing related, mowing related, it'd be very smart and wise to have everything in order before I dive into a project like that. So I'm going to top that level up one last little time here. We'll do a bit of a test drive, and then we'll see what our levels show us. And we should be all complete after this rear end oil change for the K66 Trans-axle. All right, so we're able to pop wheelies again. That must mean it's working totally fine. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, it has some torque. That's the idea behind it. It didn't seem quite as noisy as it was in the past for me, the near recent past, but I was also towing a lot lately with it, so it was certainly working overtime, and it was due for the oil change. So now that we've got fresh fluid in the back, we've double checked the levels. I'm ready to reinstall my rear mount, my bumper and all that stuff. And basically button this up and proceed on to the next task here. As far as longevity goes, I want to say that I've put almost 200 hours onto this rear end now, and the type of stuff I'm doing with this is not your typical yard work. Of course, I do cut the grass on occasion. It's well overdue right now. I'm towing the gravel drag, I'm towing the lawn roller, the aerator. I've towed vehicles with this. I've always got my suitcase weights stacked on the bumper to add some weight. So this machine is not exactly living an easy life right now. It's hard to tell on the video, but this is a little bit of a hilly property. It's certainly not totally flat. It's by no means like extreme, but there are some spots that are a little heftier than others. So for me, upgrading this machine like I had done, getting rid of the original K46 and putting in this K66 has made it a completely different animal, and I would absolutely do this again. The only upgrade I would consider with regards to this setup right now is if there was an available locking rear differential option. If that was available, I would put that on this machine in a second. Just because out here where there's soft grass and dirt, I tend to get stuck and I one wheel peel. I've got just one wheel turning, and you know, then it's a bit of a problem at times. But the newer tires on this machine have made a difference as well, but that's not the end all solution. So anyways, that's enough mumbling for me. Thank you guys for watching. If you've got yourself a K66, I hope you enjoy it, and it certainly does upgrade the machine's capability tenfold. It made this thing from a dog into a real tool finally. So all right, thanks again. We'll see you guys on the next round. Cheers.